The intercom crackled in the silence. Detective Sarah Blake froze, her flashlight beam trembling against the tunnel wall. She had heard whispers before, but this time was different. This time, the voice was close to close. "You're standing where she died, detective, and you're next." Her pulse hammered. Behind her, Nurse Emily clutched a terrified resident, begging Sarah not to open the door. But she couldn't stop now. She had to see what lay hidden inside the retirement home's forgotten heart. With a deep breath, Sarah unlatched the bolt. The heavy wooden door groaned open. Inside, the smell of dust and decay hit her like a wave. Stacks of reel-to-reel tapes lined the shelves, each labeled with names of the dead. On the desk sat a recorder, still spinning, still whispering. And above it all, Polaroids of residents pinned to the wall, sleeping, helpless, unaware. Then she saw the figure, a nurse in a crisp white uniform, her face half shadow, half smile. Margaret Hale, the woman who had died decades ago, the nurse who had confessed to murders long buried. Sarah raised her gun, but the voice came again, filling every corner of the tunnel. "Mercy isn't over, detective. Mercy never ends." And for the first time in her career, Sarah Blake wondered if she was staring into the eyes of the living or the dead. Chapter 1: The First Whisper. The rain was coming down in sheets. The night detective Sarah Blake pulled her car into the lot of Maplewood Retirement Home. The red brick building stood squat against the storm, its windows glowing faintly with warm yellow light. But there was something unwelcoming about the way the wind rattled the gutters, and how the shadows stretched across the entrance. She'd been called out here plenty of times before, mostly for petty theft, an occasional missing person who wandered off, sometimes a domestic spat between staff and family members. But tonight's report was different. She killed the engine and checked the time. 11:47 p.m., too late for a routine welfare check. Her partner, Detective James O'Connor, slid out of the passenger seat, adjusting his coat collar against the downpour. "Retirement home at midnight," he muttered. "Always wanted to spend my evening this way." Sarah shot him a look. "Be grateful we're not out at a homicide scene." "Yet," O'Connor added dryly. Inside, the building smelled of disinfectant and overcooked vegetables, that familiar nursing home scent. A nurse in pale blue scrubs met them in the lobby, nervously wringing her hands. She couldn't have been more than 25, her name tag reading Emily. "Detectives, thank you for coming," she said quickly, her voice shaky. "It's the residents. They're terrified." "Of what?" Sarah asked, unclipping her badge. Emily glanced toward the ceiling, as if the answer might come over the speakers. "The intercom. They say it's been talking to them, whispering things at night." Sarah felt O'Connor's skeptical gaze land on her, but she pressed, "Talking, how they say it." "Confesses to things, murders, always after lights out, when it's quiet. Some residents say the voice told them details about crimes they'd never heard of." O'Connor chuckled under his breath. "Sounds like dementia, night terrors. Half this place is probably on sedatives." But Emily's expression didn't waver. "I heard it too." That gave Sarah pause. "You heard it yourself?" "Yes, last night, right after 1 a.m., a man's voice, low, almost like he was standing right next to me. It said he poisoned someone, that he didn't mean to, but it was too late." Emily shuddered. "I swear, it came through the intercom." Sarah exchanged a glance with O'Connor. "Show us." The hallway stretched long and sterile, lined with closed doors and nameplates. Faint snores and the hum of television sets leaked out from a few rooms. Emily led them past the nurse's station toward the lounge, where a handful of residents sat awake in their robes, whispering to one another. When the detectives entered, the group fell silent, their eyes wide with expectation. An elderly woman with thinning white hair and a shawl around her shoulders clutched her rosary beads tight. "You're here to catch him, aren't you?" The man on the speaker. "He knows things. He knows about Harold." "Who's Harold?" Sarah asked gently. "My husband," the woman whispered. "He died 30 years ago." And that voice said his name. Said he killed a man back in 62. How would it know that? Sarah crouched to her level. "And you're sure it wasn't just a dream?" The woman shook her head furiously. "I know what I heard. I'm not crazy." Another resident, a thin man in flannel pajamas, leaned forward from his wheelchair. "I heard it too. Said he smothered someone in their sleep. Laughed about it, like it was some dirty secret." His eyes glistened. "You can't ignore this." O'Connor leaned close to Sarah. "This is a waste of time. Half these folks can't remember what they had for dinner." But Sarah wasn't so sure. The fear in their faces was too real, too unified. She turned back to Emily. "Can we access the intercom system?" Emily nodded quickly. "It's controlled from the main office. Mr. Caldwell has the keys. He's the administrator." Mr. Caldwell was a stout man in his late 60s, with thinning grey hair combed neatly back and a pair of glasses perched on his nose. He didn't look thrilled to see them as they entered his office. "Detectives, this is a waste of your time," he said firmly, after they explained. "The residents here are fragile. They hear things, dream things. We do our best to comfort them, but you can't take their ramblings seriously." Sarah studied him. His tone was dismissive, almost defensive. "One of your nurses claims she heard it too." Caldwell's jaw tightened. "Emily is young and impressionable. Perhaps the stories got to her. But I assure you, there's no possible way voices are coming through our intercom system. It's decades old, but it works just fine." "Still," Sarah said, "we'd like to take a look." Caldwell sighed, then retrieved a ring of keys and led them down another hall to the security office. He unlocked a door to reveal a cramped room filled with humming electronics, dusty monitors, and the intercom console. "There it is," he said, gesturing dismissively. "The system only broadcasts from this microphone here. No tapes, no recordings." Sarah ran her fingers along the board, noticing how worn the controls were. She tapped the mic button, speaking into it. "Testing, 1, 2, 3. Her voice echoed faintly down the corridor. "See," Caldwell said, nothing mysterious about it. But then, as if mocking his words, the speaker, above their heads, crackled. All three of them froze, as a low, gravelly voice whispered, "She never woke up. I made sure of it." Emily gasped, backing toward the wall. Sarah's heart hammered as she glanced at Caldwell, whose face had gone pale. "Who the hell is on this system?" O'Connor barked, leaning over the console, but the microphone wasn't engaged. No light, no movement. The voice wasn't coming from the mic at all. "Do you remember her, Detective Blake?" The whisper continued, chilling and deliberate. "I remember you." The room fell silent. Sarah's throat tightened. The voice had said her name. For a long moment, no one moved. Rain battered the windows, the storm howling outside, but inside the retirement home, the only sound was Sarah's quickening breath. Caldwell stumbled forward, twisting knobs on the console, flipping switches. It's not possible," he stammered. "The system doesn't, there's no recording function, nothing like that." "Then explain it," Sarah snapped, her tone sharper than she intended. O'Connor crouched beside the console, examining the wiring. "Could be someone patched into the system, some kind of prank, maybe running a feed from another line. But how would they know my name?" Sarah whispered. O'Connor didn't answer. Emily clutched her arms. "That's what I've been trying to tell you. It's not just random noise. It knows things." The intercom crackled again, the whisper growing softer, almost taunting. "You'll never find me, not in time." Then silence. Sarah stood frozen, the words crawling down her spine. She felt every eye in the room waiting for her reaction. Every nervous breath of Emily, every bead of sweat on Caldwell's forehead. For the first time in her career, Sarah Blake wasn't sure if she was dealing with a criminal or something else entirely. Detective O'Connor asked quietly. Sarah forced her voice steady. "We're not leaving. Not tonight. Lock this place down. No one in or out." Caldwell opened his mouth to protest, but one sharp look from Sarah shut him up. She turned to O'Connor. "Let's split up. You check the east wing. I'll stay near the lounge with the residents. If someone's playing games with this system, they're close." "And if it's not a prank?" O'Connor asked. Sarah didn't answer. The lounge was dim when Sarah returned. Most of the residents had drifted back to their rooms, though a few lingered nervously. The woman with the rosary clutched it so tight her knuckles were white. "Did you catch him?" she asked in a trembling voice. "Not yet," Sarah said gently, "but we will." She sank into one of the vinyl chairs, letting her eyes sweep the hallway. Every shadow seemed longer, every creak of the old building louder. She couldn't shake the voice's words, how it had spoken her name. Her name wasn't public, not in any press release tied to her cases. So whoever it was, they knew her. The intercom above her head buzzed faintly. Sarah's breath caught. Slowly, she raised her eyes. "You can't hide from the truth, Detective Blake." Her blood ran cold. "I see you." Chapter 2. The Denials. The storm eased toward a steady hiss against Maplewood's windows, as if the weather, too, were catching its breath. Detective Sarah Blake didn't. She stood beneath the lounge speaker, the whisper still creeping along her nerves like frost. Around her, the night staff tried to look busy wiping already clean counters, refilling paper cups at the water cooler, avoiding her eyes. O'Connor returned from the east wing with rain in his hair and impatience in his stride. No sign of a prankster. Stairwells are clear, exits locked, only two visitors signed in, and both left before 10. Cameras are garbage, half are stuck on a blue screen from 2009. How comforting, Sarah said. Emily hovered at the edge of their circle, arms crossed tight. The residents are asking if they can sleep in the lounge. Together, let them, Sarah said. If that helps, keep them here. She eyed the intercom. And no one touches this system until I say so. Where's Caldwell? Office, Emily said. He said he's drafting a memo about panic management. Sarah's jaw worked. She turned to O'Connor. Let's split interviews. You take staff. I'll talk to residents who heard it tonight. He made a face. Grab me if the walls start talking again. Sarah nodded and watched him go. Emily started to follow, but Sarah stopped her with a look. Stay near the intercom. If it crackles, I want eyes on it. Emily swallowed. Yes, detective. The lounge felt like a church after Vespers, dim, murmurous, a flotilla of fears at low tide. Sarah grabbed a notepad and drew a slow breath. The woman with the rosary, Mrs. O'Malley, according to her nameplate, sat at the window, her reflection hovering ghost-like in the glass. Sarah took a chair opposite her, set it close enough to feel like a conversation rather than an interrogation. Mrs. O'Malley, I'm Detective Blake. You mentioned the voice, said your husband's name. The rosary clicked softly. Harold. He was a policeman. Back when police work meant walking a beat and knowing the butcher's kids by name. Her lips thinned. He wasn't a killer, no matter what that thing said. What exactly did it say? Mrs. O'Malley's eyes drifted toward the ceiling speaker. It said, Harold O'Malley, 1962, the docks, whispered like a priest in a confessional. Any other names? A few. I didn't catch them. When it said Harold, my ears filled up with blood. She blinked back tears. It isn't right to speak to the dead like that. Sarah nodded. Did you notice the time? The clock over the TV said 12:53 when it started, and then she paused. Then it said your name. We all heard it. A ripple passed through the room. A half-dozen heads tilted toward Sarah and quickly away. She thanked Mrs. O'Malley and moved among the residents, listening more than pressing. A retired teacher swore the voice had described a smothering. Pillows pulled up tight. Silence counted in heartbeats. A former steelworker said it mentioned a vial. The word was ampule, I think, and the metal taste of fear. A widower with a tremor in his right hand told her the whisper stopped and started like a bad heart. But it knew my first dog's name. His eyes glassing over. No one in this place knows that. All their details were sharp where trauma had etched them, fuzzy where expectation filled gaps. But they aligned on one thing. The voice didn't ramble. It confessed. Sarah returned to the nurse's station, where Emily stood with coffee she wasn't drinking. The young nurse tried to offer it. Her hand wasn't entirely steady. You look like you've been awake for 3 shifts, Sarah said. I was supposed to be off at midnight. I called to stay. I didn't want to leave them like this. Sarah took the cup. Tell me about the intercom. Who has the keys? How's the system wired? Emily exhaled. Keys. Caldwell, me. The night supervisor, Cheryl. Maintenance lead, Harvey. The intercom's ancient tit runs through that metal junction closet near the east wing and through the security office you saw. Only one mic, no music input. We use it to announce meal times, CPR codes, fire drills. She glanced at the speaker like it might be listening. And sometimes, I guess, to scare people. You said you recognized the voice a little. I didn't say that. A beat. I said it felt familiar. Emily pressed her knuckles to the counter. It sounds like when someone lowers their voice on purpose. Like when someone is trying to keep a secret, but also trying to get caught. Have there been prank calls? Hazing, rival staff, night shift jokes, sure. Rubber roaches in the break room, fake spiders. But this, Emily shook her head. This isn't a prank. Or if it is, it's a cruel one. That last word lodged in Sarah's chest. She was about to ask more when O'Connor reappeared, a folder tucked beneath his arm and irritation riding his shoulders. Staff interviews, lightning round, he said. Cheryl, the night supervisor, says she didn't hear anything. Claims she was on her dinner break at 12:45. Harvey from maintenance says he was replacing a ballast in the laundry room, and the intercom feed dose and tea route there, which is convenient. 2 LPNS were on med passes. Both deny any funny business. He handed Sarah a photocopy, and Caldwell thinks we're hysterical. Sarah skimmed the paper. Caldwell's memo led with language about mass suggestion and comforting residents through routine. It read like a liability waiver for compassion. Harvey, the maintenance lead, how long has he been here? Sarah asked. 8 years, he says. O'Connor scratched his jaw. Before that, City Hospital. Left right around the time their VA wing had that drug theft problem. Didn't say it that way, of course. Check if he worked with anyone here back then, Sarah said. Connections matter. A throat cleared behind them. Caldwell stood with his memo like a shield, glasses reflecting the station's fluorescent light. I understand you're canvassing, he said, trying for official, but you, re-frightening the residents with all this talk of lockdowns and voices. Maplewood has a reputation for tranquility. Your tranquility comes second to their safety, Sarah said. He sniffed. If you had any law enforcement sense, you'd consider the power of suggestion. One person claims to hear something. The rest fill in the details. Alzheimer's, Lewy body, sundown syndrome. Do those ring any bells? Nighttime is when the mind plays tricks. Does your mind usually pick specific names from 1962 at 12:53 a.m.? O'Connor asked. Mine doesn't. Caldwell's mouth flattened. We have had, over the years, tragedies. Any facility like ours does, but rumors are gasoline. I need you to tamp them down, not stoke them. We need access to your maintenance logs, Sarah said. Service calls on the intercom in the last year. Keys signed out. Any after-hours work orders. Caldwell hesitated. We keep paper logs. They're archived. I'll have to now, Sarah said. He glanced at Emily, who did an admirable job of not shrinking. Fine, he said, with the air of a man signing for a package he didn't order. But after that, I want you to make an announcement to the residents. Tell them there's nothing to fear. We'll see, Sarah said. The archive room smelled like damp cardboard and time. Caldwell found the box he wanted. Facilities, 3B, and set it on a metal table with a thump. Intercom maintenance, he said. Every time we changed a fuse or replaced the switch, Harvey logged it here. Sarah and O'Connor sifted. Most entries were drab and predictable: dusting, cleaning contacts, swapping a rusted plate. But a run of tickets from 5 months ago caught Sarah S.I. Junction closet hum, voice bleed from nurse call line, phantom buzz source unknown. Each signed by Harvey, each closed within a day. Voice bleed, Sarah repeated, tapping the line item. Caldwell peered over. When different audio systems crosstalk, that's all. Someone calls into a nurse's station, and a speaker pops in 2 rooms over. We fixed it. How? Harvey re-terminated the runs. He explained it to me once. Might as well have been Sanskrit. O'Connor lifted a stapled form. Who approved a bypass test last month? The signature scrawled at the bottom resembled Caldwell's. Caldwell flushed. We had a fire inspection. The intercom failed in one wing. I authorized a temporary workaround. Standard. Show us the junction closet, Sarah said. Caldwell's patience thinned to a thread. Detective, with respect, now, she repeated, tired of asking twice. The junction closet was a windowless space huddled between 2 hallways. A metal cabinet inside housed a tangle of wires that looked like a rainbow had died there. Harvey, maintenance lead, had the door open when they arrived, as if anticipating their interest. He was in his 50s, with a face that favored neutral expressions and hands with old scars. The administrator said, "You had questions," he said, not unfriendly. Sarah surveyed the cabinet. "You logged voice bleed in March." "Yeah." He tugged a cable, checking its seating with a practiced press. "These old systems, they get ground loops. Hum. If you look at them funny, they squeal. It's like asking a record player to do Wi-Fi. Could someone patch into it?" O'Connor asked. "Run a line from, say, a utility room, and speak through." Harvey snorted. "You'd need keys to this closet, to the security office, and to this cabinet, and you'd need time, plus a reason to want to get yelled at by me." "How many keys?" Sarah asked. 4, Harvey said. Caldwell, Cheryl, Emily, and me. That constellation of access hovered between them like a fragile mobile. Emily lifted her hand halfway. "I keep my keys clipped to me. Always." "Same," Cheryl said from the hall, appearing with coffee and managerial weariness. She had a round face, a tired smile, and an invisible badge of authority that made some people defensive around police. "I've worked here 15 years, detective. If I wanted to scare the residents, I'd show them the annual budget." "Where were you at 12:53? Sarah asked. "Break room," Cheryl answered. "Soup from a can." "Harvey saw me. He was fixing the flicker in the hallway." Harvey nodded. "Yeah, I was 10 feet from her." The intercoms mounted outside the break room. It didn't make a peep. Emily looked from one to the other. "We heard it in the lounge though," she said. "And the East Wing residents buzzed me from both. So the feed didn't hit every speaker," O'Connor said. "Selective." Harvey lifted a brow. "Impossible." Sarah studied the cabinet again. A strip of tape labeled the wings. Some wires had newer insulation, bright and clean against the yellowed originals. Whoever had tinkered here recently had cared enough to tidy their work. "Any staff turnover lately?" she asked Caldwell. "Anyone fired under bad circumstances?" Caldwell's pause was shorter this time. "We had an orderly whiz. New 2 nights. He lasted 3 weeks. He was late twice, got mouthy with an LPN, and left without notice. Not exactly your audio mastermind." Sarah tucked the name away. "We'll want his file." "You'll need a warrant," Caldwell said reflexively. "You'll need a conscience," O'Connor muttered. Caldwell's frown deepened. "Detective," a timid voice from the hall cut in. Detectives." It was Emily again, holding her radio like a talisman. "Mrs. Singh is asking if someone can sit with her. She's scared." Sarah let out a breath she hadn't realized she was holding. "We're almost done here." She turned to Harvey. "No more temporary workarounds. No more bypasses. If you find anything, you call me." Harvey inclined his head. "Yes, ma'am." They filed back toward the lounge. In the corridor, Cheryl fell into step with Sarah. "I know how this looks," Cheryl said quietly. "Like neglect dressed up as inevitability." Sarah was surprised by the confession. "What do you mean?" "You work nights long enough, you get used to too much death," Cheryl said. "It makes you numb in self-defense. But this," she gestured toward the ceiling speaker. "This is cruel. Don't let Caldwell talk you out of taking it seriously." "Are there other stories?" Sarah asked, thinking of the way the residents had whispered about the building like a person listening at doors. Cheryl's gaze slid down the hall, to a wall of framed black and white photographs Maplewood staff from decades past, frozen in neat rows, their smiles as dated as their uniforms. Her finger settled on one face, a nurse with a sharp chin and a starch-stiff cap. "We had a nurse, years back," she said softly. "Died young. People like to tell ghost stories after a death like that. Makes them feel less alone." "What was her name?" Sarah asked, but Cheryl's mouth pressed into a line. "There are rules about protected health information," she said at last, retreating into policy like a trench, "and legends are bad for business." Before Sarah could prod, Caldwell's voice rose in the lounge, bright and flat. He was reading his memo to the residents like a bedtime story no one wanted. "There is nothing to be alarmed about," he intoned. "Our intercom system is functioning normally. Please try to rest." A murmur of discontent moved through the room like static. Emily stood near the mic with her hands folded, not meeting Sarah's eyes. O'Connor shook his head once, the motion small and frustrated. Sarah stepped toward the console. "Don't." The ceiling speaker snapped alive. It didn't crackle this time. It breathed. The voice slid into the room on a gentle current, almost kind. And yet the kindness was the worst part. "We don't have to pretend it was an accident anymore," the whisper said. Caldwell froze mid-syllable, his script sagging in his grip. "I told her it was just to help her sleep, a little more, to make her comfortable. She asked me to hold her hand." A widow in the second row began to whimper. Sarah's blood iced over. She knew this rhythm. It was the cadence of a confession, unspooling into something precise. She was in room 214 back then. Winter. Snow stuck to the screens. "She coughed when I opened the line. She coughed and then she didn't." Sarah's throat clicked. 214. "You marked it natural." The voice lowered to an intimate hush. "You wrote heart failure, like a bedtime story." Across the room, Emily's eyes flew to Sarah's. The young nurse looked as if she'd fallen through ice. The whisper warmed with a dreadful tenderness. "But we know the truth, don't we, Lorraine?" Sarah didn't need her notepad. She didn't need her files. The name was a hammer to the skull. Lorraine Pritchard, room 214. Winter. 10 years ago, a family complaint, a quiet inquiry, insufficient evidence, an elderly heart, too tired to argue with science. The case had never left her desk. It had simply dried there. O'Connor was already turning toward her, face sheened with the same memory. Sarah Lorraine Pritchard, the voice repeated, as if tasting the name. You were so small under those blankets. You squeezed my hand. You said, I'm not ready. The residents were a tableau, some praying, some staring, some mouthing the name like it might stop a curse. You're ready now, the whisper sighed, almost pleased. Every hair on Sarah's arms lifted. Her mind flashed to the old file, a morphine pump, an oxygen line, charting that looked perfunctory, because that was how death could look in a place where it visited every week. Caldwell finally found his voice. Turn it off, he hissed to no one and everyone, grabbing for the console with shaking hands. Turn it off. Emily flinched back. The mic wasn't even engaged. You marked it natural. The voice crooned again. I marked it done. Then the speaker went dead. No crackle, no hiss. Just the soft after silence of a thing that knows it has said enough. Sarah stood at the center of the room, her heart beating so hard she could feel it in her lips. Around her, the world seemed to list, like a ship taking on water. Caldwell's memo fell to the floor. O'Connor broke the quiet with a whisper meant only for Sarah. That's your cold case. Sarah's mouth was suddenly dry. Not anymore, she said. A single resident began to cry thin, high, terrible. And then the intercom breathed one last time, a coda like a finger to its lips. It said. There are more. Chapter 3. The Cold Case Connection. The rain had tapered to a damp drizzle outside, but inside Maplewood, the storm had only gathered strength. The residents whispered anxiously, clustered in groups like schoolchildren after a playground fight. A few begged to call their families. Others sat rigid in their chairs, eyes locked on the ceiling speakers, as though any second the voice would breathe again. Detective Sarah Blake stood in the center of it all, every nerve jangling. The name still rang in her head. Lorraine Pritchard, room 214. She remembered the file to Wellen, elderly woman, morphine drip, failing lungs, the kind of death you accepted until a daughter insisted something felt wrong. Sarah had dug, briefly, but with no proof. The complaint had been shelved, unsolved, unfinished. Natural causes, the paperwork said. But the whisper had spoken like it was in the room that night. O'Connor leaned in close, his voice low. We can't dismiss it now. That wasn't coincidence. Sarah nodded once. We're pulling the file. First thing. Caldwell hovered nearby, sweat beading under his collar despite the air conditioning. He looked like a man watching his foundation crack beneath him. Detectives, I must insist we de-escalate. These stories are dangerous to my residents' peace of mind. We don't need to go dredging up the past. Sarah turned on him, sharp. The past just dredged itself up. Unless you can explain how a faulty intercom recites details from a closed case file, only I've seen. Caldwell's mouth opened, then closed again, no words finding traction. Emily stood behind him, arms wrapped tightly around herself. Her eyes darted from Sarah to the intercom, and back again, as if she were caught between wanting to run and needing to confess. Sarah didn't miss it. Emily, she said gently, what do you know about Lorraine Pritchard? The young nurse's lips parted, but Caldwell snapped. That's enough. His voice boomed louder than the intercom ever had. Miss Roberts has no comment on staff matters. She wasn't even employed here at the time. Emily flinched at his bark, shrinking back. Sarah filed the reaction away. Caldwell was hiding something. The residents began shuffling back toward their rooms under Cheryl's guidance, though many protested. Sarah caught snippets as they passed. It knew her name. They can't keep it quiet anymore. It'll come for me next. The retirement home's air felt thicker, heavier, like every sigh added weight. When the lounge was nearly empty, Sarah and O'Connor regrouped near the nurse's station. He pulled out his phone, scrolling through the precinct's case management app. Lorraine Pritchard, he muttered. Winter, 10 years back. Complaint filed by her daughter. Mother sedated beyond necessary level. Autopsy inconclusive. No further action. He scrolled further, jaw tightening. Guess whose signature shows up on the hospital records, verifying death? Caldwell. He was already administrator then. Sarah clenched her fists. Of course. Emily glanced nervously over her shoulder, then leaned in, whispering, I've heard her name before. Not from tonight. From the old stories. Sarah's eyes narrowed. What stories? Emily hesitated, chewing her lip. Some of the longtime staff talk about a nurse who died here. Years before I started, Margaret Hale. They say that she helped patients pass on, quicker, kinder, but it was rumor, ghost stories, really." Her hands trembled. "Some of the residents call her the Angel of Maplewood, or the Angel of Death," O'Connor muttered. Sarah's heart thudded. "Is Margaret's name in the old records?" Emily nodded reluctantly. "I've seen it in storage. She was on staff in the late 70s and 80s. There are notes, incidents, but officially, she died in an accident, a fall." Her voice dropped. "In this building," Caldwell cleared his throat loudly, stepping closer. "None of this is relevant. The intercom glitch is nothing more than faulty wiring. We'll have maintenance. Save it." Sarah cut him off. "This is a crime scene until proven otherwise," he sputtered. "A crime scene? On what basis?" "On the basis that your intercom just delivered a confession from a dead patient's S-file," Sarah said. "That makes Maplewood a nexus for evidence until I say otherwise." Caldwell's face reddened. "You're blowing this out of proportion." "No," O'Connor said flatly. "You've been under proportion for years, and now the past is bleeding through your walls." Later, in the cramped security office, Sarah and O'Connor combed through boxes of old paperwork Emily had smuggled from storage. Emily sat nervously on a stool, wringing her hands, while the storm outside picked up again, rattling the old panes. Sarah opened a brittle folder labeled Incident Reports -1985. The first few pages were mundane. Falls, misplaced medications, residents slipping in showers. But halfway through, her stomach turned. Handwritten notes, Margaret Hale's name at the top. Patient requested higher dosage for pain. Nurse Hale administered. Patient expired within the hour. Another, discrepancy in morphine vial count. Nurse Hale reported spill. And another, resident death ruled natural. Nurse Hale listed as attending. The handwriting was scrawled, rushed, but consistent. "Jesus," O'Connor muttered. She was everywhere. Sarah flipped another page. A grainy black and white photo. Staff lined up for a holiday card. Margaret Hale was in the center, her cap perched perfectly, her eyes steady. There was something unsettling about her gaze, calm, clinical, almost cold. Emily leaned over Sarah's shoulder. "That's her," she whispered. "That's the face in the stories." Sarah stared at the photograph, her pulse quickening. "This woman's been dead for decades, but her voice is on your intercom." The intercom above the desk crackled, as if responding to her words. Sarah froze, pen stilling on the page. O'Connor shot her a look. "Don't tell me." The whisper slithered into the room, low and unmistakable. Not every death was mercy, detective. Some were curiosity. The three of them froze. The speaker hissed softly, then fell silent again, like it was satisfied. Emily's eyes filled with tears. "You see, it's her. It's always been her." Sarah's hand tightened around the file. She forced herself to speak steady, though her throat was dry. "We don't know what it is yet, but we're going to find out." O'Connor shut the box with a slam. "Before she names another." They left the office to check the east wing. The hallways eerily still. As they passed room 214, the long empty room where Lorraine had died, Sarah slowed. The door was closed, but the brass numbers glinted faintly under the fluorescent lights. She felt an almost magnetic pull toward it. Emily stopped behind her. "No one's used that room in years. They keep it unassigned. Bad luck." They say. Sarah touched the knob. It was cold. She turned it slowly, pushing the door open. The room smelled faintly of dust and antiseptic. The bed stripped bare. The walls lined with old paint. But on the dresser, incongruous in the emptiness, sat a single object. An old tape recorder, its buttons worn, a tiny red light blinking faintly. Sarah's heart pounded. She stepped closer, hesitated, then pressed play. A hiss of static filled the silence, followed by a voice, a woman's voice. Calm, measured, deliberate. "Lorraine Pritchard, morphine, 10 milligrams. She cried when I touched her hand, said she wasn't ready. I watched her go still. I stayed until the end." Emily gasped, covering her mouth. O'Connor swore under his breath. The tape clicked off, the room falling into silence once more. Sarah stared at the recorder, her skin crawling. The voice wasn't just coming through the intercom. Someone had been recording confessions, someone who wanted them found. She turned to speak, but before the words left her mouth, the intercom above the bed buzzed to life. The same calm voice, no longer distant, whispered into the stale air. "You're standing where she died, Detective Blake." Sarah's breath caught. The voice deepened. And you're next. Chapter 4. Rising Fear. The next morning brought no relief. The storm had passed outside, leaving Maplewood Retirement Home wrapped in an uneasy stillness. But inside the halls the air was tight with whispers and fear. Rumors spread faster than breakfast trays. Residents claimed to see shadows where no one stood. A few refused to leave the lounge at all, dragging blankets and pillows with them, insisting they'd be safer together. Detective Sarah Blake hadn't slept. She'd spent the last 3 hours combing through Lorraine Pritchard's file again, listening to the tape from room 214 until the words burned into her skull. She wasn't ready. I watched her go still. The calm cruelty of it gnawed at her. Now, in the nurse's station, she stood with O'Connor, their coffee untouched, watching the staff fumble through their routines. They're all on edge, O'Connor muttered, eyes scanning the hall. Half the staff keep glancing at the intercom like it's going to sprout teeth. The other half are pretending nothing's wrong. Classic cover-your-ass behavior. Sarah leaned closer. Who looks the most rattled to you? Emily, for one. Kid's pale as chalk. Caldwell's angry anger usually means fear in disguise. And Harvey, he's been hovering around that junction closet like it's his bedroom. Sarah rubbed her temple. He logged those voice bleed tickets. If someone patched recordings into the system, maintenance is our first stop. Before O'Connor could reply, a shrill cry cut through the hallway. They rushed to room 119, where 2 aides were crouched over an elderly woman collapsed on the floor. Her name badge read Mrs. Callahan. Her face was ashen, her breath shallow. She just fell. One aide gasped. 1 second she was fine. The next, Mrs. Callahan's lips trembled. Her eyes darted toward the ceiling speaker. With what little breath she had, she whispered. It said, "I'm next." Sarah's chest clenched. The intercom above the bed popped to life. "The lady in 109, her heart won't last the night." O'Connor cursed, shoving the aides aside to start CPR. Emily burst into the room with a crash cart, her hands trembling but quick. Caldwell stormed in moments later, his face red with fury. "This is madness," he bellowed over the commotion. "Shut it down. Do you hear me? Shut the damn thing down." "No," Sarah barked. "Not until we know where it's coming from." Caldwell loomed over Harvey, who had followed in behind him. "Fix it. Pull the wires. Rip it out. I don't care." Harvey bristled. "If I pull the wrong line, we lose the call system for the entire wing. You want residents dying because they can't buzz for help." The chaos rose until Emily shouted, "We're losing her." All eyes snapped back to Mrs. Callahan. Her pulse faltered, then steadied under the shock pads. The monitors wailed, then calmed. She was alive, but barely. Sarah turned on Caldwell. "If you shut down that system now, I'll charge you with obstruction. Do you understand me?" Caldwell's jaw clenched so hard it seemed his teeth might crack. He didn't answer. An hour later, Mrs. Callahan was stable, but unconscious in the medical ward. Sarah and O'Connor regrouped in the East Wing corridor. The tension in the air was thicker than ever. She believed it, O'Connor said grimly. Voice said her number, and her heart gave out. "Tell me that's coincidence." Sarah crossed her arms. "Coincidence or not, Caldwell's losing control of this place. If panic keeps spreading, someone else will get hurt. Then we contain it. We find the source." O'Connor leaned against the wall, lowering his voice. "I've been thinking. The voice isn't everywhere, right? Some wings hear it, others don't. That means whoever's running this knows how to target the feed. And that means they're moving behind the walls." Sarah frowned. "Behind the walls?" "Yeah." O'Connor pulled a folded blueprint from his jacket. "I had dispatch email me the original plans for Maplewood. Guess what I found?" He spread the paper across a nurse's cart. The faded lines revealed a labyrinth beneath the surface maintenance corridors. Crawl spaces, service shafts, hidden tunnels. Sarah breathed. Running parallel to the residents' rooms. O'Connor tapped the map. "If you knew these routes, you could move unseen, tap into wiring, even place recorders inside walls." Sarah felt a chill ripple through her. "That explains the whispers. Not supernatural, someone's using the infrastructure against us." "But who?" O'Connor asked. "Harvey knows the layout. Caldwell signs off on the work orders. Emily grew up on ghost stories about this place. Any of them could have had reason." Before Sarah could answer, Emily appeared in the hall, her face pale. "Detectives," she whispered, glancing around. "You need to see something." She led them down a side corridor to a locked door, marked "Authorized Personnel Only." With shaking hands, she produced a key from her pocket. I shouldn't have this, she admitted, but I had to know. She opened the door. A narrow passage stretched beyond, dimly lit, the air stale with dust and mildew. Sarah stepped inside, her flashlight cutting a pale beam along the concrete. The walls bore scuffs, footprints ground into the dust. Cigarette butts littered the floor, fresh enough to stink. Someone's been here recently, O'Connor muttered. At the far end of the corridor, Sarah's beam caught a scrap of fabric snagged on a pipe-white cloth. Old-fashioned, yellowed with age, a nurse's uniform cap. Emily's breath hitched. That's Margaret Hale's. I've seen pictures. That's the same style. Sarah crouched, bagging the fabric carefully. Her skin prickled. Whether this was evidence of a prankster or something darker, someone wanted Margaret Hale's ghost alive again. She turned toward Emily. How did you know this was here? Emily hesitated, hugging herself. One of the residents told me, Mr. Fisher. He said he heard footsteps in his walls at night. Not creaks, not pipes, footsteps. Sarah's pulse quickened. Where does this tunnel lead? Emily pointed down the corridor. It runs the length of the east wing. Behind most of the rooms. O'Connor exhaled. Perfect place to hide. Perfect place to listen. Sarah stood, her flashlight steady. The tunnel stretched into darkness like an open throat, waiting to swallow them. And then, faintly, from the shadows ahead, came the sound of breathing. Slow, rhythmic, human. Sarah raised her gun. Who's there? The intercom above their heads crackled alive, though no speakers were visible. Closer. Detective, you're almost home. The words slithered along the tunnel walls, every syllable vibrating through the concrete. Emily whimpered, clutching Sarah's sleeve. Sarah's heart hammered. Whoever was down here wasn't just hiding, they were inviting her in. Chapter 5. Secrets in the walls. The tunnel swallowed them whole. Concrete pressed tight on either side, the air damp and sour with mildew. Sarah's flashlight beam skimmed over wires stapled to the walls, pipes groaning faintly as water ran through them. Every sound felt amplified in the narrow passage, the shuffle of their shoes, Emily's shallow breathing, the soft click as O'Connor chambered around. The voice had gone silent again, but its echo clung to Sarah's skin. Closer. Detective, you're almost home. Stay behind me, Sarah whispered to Emily. The young nurse nodded quickly, clutching her radio like a lifeline. O'Connor swept the rear with his light. These tunnels are a damn rabbit, Warren. No wonder no one's found anything down here. Place was built to hide problems, not fix them. They moved slowly, the tunnel branching into a fork ahead. On the floor between the two paths lay fresh footprints pressed into the dust boots, not staff sneakers. The prints veered left, into deeper darkness. Sarah crouched, brushing the edge of a sole print with her gloved fingers. Recent, maybe a few hours old. Emily shivered. But there aren't supposed to be anyone down here, only maintenance. And Harvey, he doesn't wear boots like that. Whoever's been playing with the intercom, O'Connor muttered. They followed the left passage. The walls grew tighter, forcing them to walk single file. Sarah's light caught something scattered along the floor, crumpled cigarette butts, stained yellow at the tips. A few still held the acrid scent of smoke. O'Connor frowned. Someone spends a lot of time down here, and wants us to know it, Sarah said, noting how the butts had been left in a line, like breadcrumbs. Ahead, the tunnel widened into a service chamber. An old metal chair sat crooked against the wall, a small crate beside it. On top of the crate lay several objects, a rusted lighter, a cracked mirror, and a hospital ID badge sealed in a plastic sleeve. Sarah lifted the badge with her gloved hand. The photo was grainy, black and white. The name at the bottom, Margaret Hale, RN. Emily gasped. That's her. That's the nurse from the photo. O'Connor let out a low whistle. So either Nurse Hale's back from the dead, or someone's staging a pretty twisted shrine. Sarah tucked the badge into an evidence bag, her pulse quickening. This wasn't just random vandalism. Someone wanted to breathe life back into Margaret's legend. She scanned the chamber again. On the wall opposite the chair, scratched into the concrete with something sharp, were words etched over and over. Mercy is a gift. Mercy is a gift. Mercy is a gift. The repetition was frantic, uneven, letters carved so deep they cut into the stone. Emily clapped a hand over her mouth. Dear God. Sarah's skin prickled. Not a ghost, not a glitch. Someone's down here, playing judge and jury. They pressed deeper. The tunnel branched again, this time sloping upward. Sarah followed the incline until her flashlight landed on something chilling, a narrow grate, bolted into the wall, opening directly into a resident's room. Through the slits, she saw the dim glow of a bedside lamp, the shadow of a frail figure tossing in sleep. O'Connor swore softly. They've been watching them, listening to them, right through the walls. Emily's face went pale. And, speaking to them, that's how the voice feels so close. It's right behind the walls. Sarah's mind raced. Whoever controlled these tunnels had unfettered access to the residents, the wiring, the intercom system. They could feed whispers, confessions, whatever they wanted directly into people's rooms. Which means, Sarah said slowly, they could be anyone. Staff, O'Connor added grimly. Someone who knows the schedule, knows when the halls are clear. Emily's voice quavered. But who? Why? Before Sarah could answer, the intercom above the grate buzzed faintly. A voice seeped through, not booming, not broadcast to the whole building, but soft, private. She's awake now. She knows I'm here. Sarah's blood ran cold. She spun her light back toward the tunnel behind them. Nothing but shadows. Move, she hissed. They hurried forward, turning down another branch that opened into an even larger chamber. This one looked like an old storage room, long abandoned. Dust clung to stacked boxes, broken furniture, and yellowed patient charts spilling across the floor. Sarah crouched, picking one up. Her breath caught. The chart was from 1983, patient deceased, signed off by Nurse Hale. Another, from 1986. Another, 1990. Dozens of them, all marked with Hale's name. This is a graveyard of paperwork, O'Connor muttered. How the hell did this never make it into official archives? Because Caldwell buried it, Sarah said darkly. He's been covering this place's rot for years. Emily knelt beside Sarah, her eyes wide. It's true. Then, she killed them, and he hid it. Sarah didn't answer. She sifted through the stack until her hand froze on a chart newer than the rest, dated just 6 months ago. The attending nurse line was blank, but scrawled in pen at the bottom was a signature she recognized instantly. Margaret Hale. Her pulse hammered. Hale had been dead for decades, but here was her name, in fresh ink. Detective O'Connor said softly. He was shining his light toward the far wall. Sarah turned. Her stomach dropped. Pinned to the wall with rusted tacks were Polaroid photos, dozens of them. Grainy shots of residents sleeping in their beds. Faces slack, mouths open, vulnerable, exposed. The most recent photo, still curling at the edge, showed Mrs. Callahan, the woman who'd collapsed hours earlier. Her eyes were closed, her lips parted, taken from inside her room. Emily staggered back, nearly tripping over the box of charts. This is insane. Someone's stalking them, photographing them like trophies. Sarah's throat was dry, not just stalking, choosing victims. The intercom snapped to life again, this time from the corner of the chamber, where a speaker wire dangled. She begged me to stop. She begged me, and I smiled. Emily whimpered. O'Connor raised his gun, scanning the walls. Show yourself, he barked. The voice chuckled, a low, humorless sound that slithered along the concrete. You'll never find me. I've been here all along. Suddenly, from somewhere deeper in the tunnels, came the unmistakable sound of footsteps, fast, deliberate, retreating. Sarah bolted toward the noise, flashlight beam bouncing wildly. The tunnels twisted and turned, the footsteps always just ahead. Stop, she shouted, her voice echoing off the walls. Police. But the steps grew fainter, slipping into the labyrinth until silence swallowed them. Sarah slowed, chest heaving, the darkness pressing in like a weight. She swung her light back and forth, but the tunnels were empty. Whoever had been here knew the layout better than she did. Behind her, O'Connor caught up, sweat beading his brow. They're toying with us, he said, dragging us deeper. Sarah gritted her teeth, adrenaline still coursing. No more games. She turned back toward the chamber, where Emily waited, pale and trembling among the boxes of forgotten death. But when they returned, the Polaroids were gone. Every single one. And on the wall where they had hung, scrawled in black marker, was a single sentence. Mercy is coming for all of you. Chapter 6. The Staff's Lies. The discovery in the tunnels spread through Maplewood like smoke. By noon, the residents were whispering about the death photos. The detectives had found some claiming they'd seen a nurse in an old-fashioned uniform wandering the halls the night before. Others swore the ghost of Margaret Hale was punishing them for surviving too long. The fragile calm that Caldwell worked so hard to maintain had shattered. Sarah Blake sat in Caldwell's office now. Her evidence bags spread across his desk. The nurse's cap, the cigarette butts, the Polaroids she'd managed to grab before they vanished. The administrator's hands trembled as he lit a cigarette of his own. His first in years by the look of how he coughed after the inhale. "This is outrageous," he said, eyes darting anywhere but the photos. "Fabrications. Someone planted this junk down there to stir panic. You can't seriously expect me to believe some dead nurse is whispering through my walls." Sarah leaned forward. "I don't care what I believe. What I know is that you've been sitting on a rotting history for decades. Patients dying under suspicious circumstances. Records signed by Margaret Hale, and when she died, if she really did, you buried it. Why?" Caldwell's jaw clenched. "Because the home would have collapsed under scandal. Because hundreds of innocent residents would have been displaced. I protected Maplewood." "You protected yourself," Sarah shot back. "And you let a killer fade into rumor." From the corner, O'Connor cleared his throat, tossing a file onto the desk. "Funny thing, Cal Hale's death certificate, signed by you. No autopsy. Cause of death listed as accidental fall. That sound right to you?" Caldwell's eyes flickered. She fell down the Old West stairwell. Everyone knew she was unstable, obsessed with patients. She would have ruined us if her behavior had come out. Sarah's stomach turned. "So you covered it up. You've been covering her shadow ever since." Before Caldwell could answer, a knock rattled the door. Emily stepped in, pale but resolute. "Detectives," she said softly. "You should talk to Louise." Caldwell bristled. "The janitor. He's nothing but trouble." Emily ignored him. "Louise swears he's seen her. At night, in uniform. He's terrified." Sarah straightened. "Where is he now?" They found Louise in the basement laundry room, hunched on a stool, a mop propped against the wall. His hands fidgeted with a string of beads on his wrist. He looked up as Sarah entered, his eyes bloodshot with lack of sleep. "I didn't do anything," he said before she even spoke. "I just clean. That's all." "No one's saying you did," Sarah said gently. "But you told Emily you saw someone." Who? Louise licked his lips. "A woman. White uniform, old style, like the pictures on the wall. I thought it was a prank, but she looked right at me, didn't blink. Then she walked into the East Wing hall and disappeared. I swear." "Disappeared how?" O'Connor asked. Louise shook his head violently. "Not a trick of light. Not my imagination. I'm not crazy." He leaned forward, lowering his voice. "She was carrying something, a clipboard, and when she passed, I smelled smoke, like cigarettes." Sarah's pulse jumped. The cigarette butts in the tunnel, the shrine, the cap. Whoever was behind this was deliberately wearing Margaret Hale's ghost like a mask. "Louise," she asked carefully, "do you know these tunnels? Have you been inside them?" Louise flinched. "No, I don't have keys. Only Harvey does." He looked up desperately. "Please, you believe me, don't you? She's here. She's walking these halls." Before Sarah could respond, the intercom above the laundry room door crackled. "You shouldn't have told them, Louise." Louise froze, color draining from his face. "No, no, no," the voice purred. "You broke your promise." Suddenly, the fluorescent lights flickered overhead. Louise bolted upright, stumbling toward the door. "I can't, she's listening. I can't stay." He shoved past O'Connor, sprinting down the hall. "Louise," Sarah called, chasing after him. They followed the sound of his footsteps up the stairwell and into the main corridor. Residents poked their heads out of rooms, alarmed by the commotion. Louise started toward the exit, but Caldwell was already there, blocking the door. "You're not leaving," Caldwell snapped. "Not after this chaos you've caused." "I didn't cause it," Louise cried. His voice cracked. "She's real. She's coming. Enough." Caldwell shouted, gripping his arm. Sarah pushed forward. "Let him go, Caldwell. He's not your prisoner." But before the standoff could break, the intercom came alive again, this time, blaring across the entire facility. The voice was loud, booming, laced with mockery. "Luis Vasquez, 2018, the nursing home across town. You remember, don't you? The patient who drowned in her bath." Every resident in the hall gasped. Heads turned toward Luis, who went rigid, shaking his head. "No, no, I didn't." "You held her under," the voice hissed. "You wanted her quiet, didn't you, Luis?" "Lies," Luis screamed, his voice breaking. "I didn't. She slipped. It wasn't me." His knees buckled, and he collapsed to the floor, sobbing. Caldwell pointed a shaking finger. There, that's your culprit. A killer, just like I said. Sarah's mind spun. Was Louise guilty, or just another victim of the voice's manipulation? Emily crouched beside him, her face stricken. Louise, look at me. Did you really? He sobbed harder, covering his face. I never meant please you don't understand. O'Connor leaned toward Sarah, his voice tight. That's a confession if I've ever heard one. Sarah wasn't so sure. The timing was too perfect, the voice too eager to cast blame. Whoever's behind this is pulling strings, she muttered. They're framing him. The intercom hissed again, soft and intimate, as though whispering directly into Sarah's ear. Don't trust them, detective. You know what they're capable of. Sarah's skin crawled. The voice wasn't just targeting residents anymore. It was targeting her judgment, her faith in the people around her. She looked around the residents, staring, Emily trembling, Caldwell smug, Louise broken on the floor. Everyone was a suspect now, and that was the point. That evening, Sarah sat alone in the tunnels. The Polaroid spread out in front of her like a grotesque deck of cards. She replayed the whispers in her mind, one by one, each confession carefully chosen to cut someone down. The voice wasn't random, it was deliberate. It wanted chaos, distrust, division. Her flashlight beam landed on one Polaroid she hadn't studied closely before. It showed the hallway outside the lounge, and in the corner of the frame, barely visible in the shadows, stood a figure in a nurse's cap. Sarah's breath hitched. The figure was facing the camera, and smiling. Chapter 7. The Ghost in the Records. The next day began with dread. Even in daylight, Maplewood felt smothered in shadows. The residents gathered in clumps, whispering about Lucy's breakdown, about the names the voice kept spitting out. Some swore they heard footsteps pacing in their ceilings last night. Others claimed to see a nurse's silhouette in their doorways before it vanished. Fear had settled into the halls like mold. Detective Sarah Blake had spent most of the morning buried in records boxes pulled from the storage closet. Caldwell had been so reluctant to open. She sat at a table in the staff lounge, the files fanned out in front of her. O'Connor stood behind her, sipping bitter coffee, scanning over her shoulder. Most of the papers were brittle, stained with age. Some looked deliberately incomplete, charts with lines left blank, names crossed out. But then Sarah opened a patient logbook, bound in cracked leather, the cover embossed only with the year, 1989. Inside, the names marched down the pages, each entry neat and precise. Margaret Hale's signature appeared again and again. Resident deaths, dozens of them, many marked as natural, but the frequency was alarming. Every week, sometimes more than one. Jesus, O'Connor muttered. She signed off half the deaths in this building for years. Sarah flipped faster. The pattern was unmistakable. Every questionable case, the pain patients, the lonely ones, the ones without family, carried Hale's signature. The so-called angel of Maplewood hadn't been merciful. She'd been methodical. At the back of the book, Sarah froze. The handwriting changed. The last few entries weren't Margaret's tidy script. They were jagged, frantic, scrawled like someone in the grip of obsession. Each note was signed N. How the final line read, "Mercy is a gift. Mercy is mine." O'Connor leaned in. That's not archival. That's recent. Sarah's stomach knotted. Margaret Hale had been dead for decades. So who was still signing her name? The intercom above the lounge table crackled to life. Sarah tensed, expecting the familiar rasp. But what came through made her blood run cold. It was her own voice. "Detective Sarah Blake," the intercom said, perfectly mimicking her cadence. "You knew about the deaths. You buried the files. You let them suffer." Sarah's chest tightened. "No," she whispered. The voice continued, a twisted mirror. "You wrote it down yourself. Your signatures in the logs. You killed them." O'Connor slammed his coffee onto the table. "Cut the feed," he barked. But the intercom wasn't connected to the mic. Nothing was. The lounge door creaked open. Caldwell stepped in, face ashen. Behind him, a few staff members crowded the hall, eyes wide. They had heard it too. "That's your detective," Caldwell said bitterly. "That's her voice. How long have you known, Detective Blake? How long have you been one of them?" Sarah shot to her feet. "That wasn't me. It's manipulation. Someone's splicing recordings." But doubt flickered in the staff's eyes. The residents nearby had already begun to murmur. "The detective is in on it. The detective is the killer." Emily pushed through the doorway, shaking her head. No, that's not her. She's being framed." Her voice wavered but firmed at the end. The intercom hissed again, cutting her off. "Don't trust Emily either," Sarah's voice whispered. "She knows more than she tells." Emily went pale, her lips trembling. The room broke into chaos, staff muttering accusations, residents demanding answers. Caldwell seized the moment, pointing at Sarah like a judge passing sentence. "This investigation is over," he declared. "You're destabilizing my facility. First, Luis, now this. You've brought the devil into Maplewood." Sarah's pulse pounded. She wasn't losing control, someone was pulling the strings to make it look like she had. She leaned close to O'Connor. "We're not dealing with a ghost. We're dealing with someone who has recordings of us. Someone who's been listening the whole time." O'Connor's jaw tightened. "Through the tunnels, through the vents. They've been building a library of voices." Sarah nodded grimly. "And now they're using mine." That night, the halls grew restless. Residents refused to sleep alone. The staff argued in hushed tones. Luis was locked in a storage room at Caldwell's insistence, the administrator claiming it was for everyone's safety. Sarah had protested, but Caldwell had outmaneuvered her with paperwork he said signed in as staff, meaning the home technically held authority over him. Sarah stalked the corridors, every creak of the building setting her on edge. She carried the logbook in her coat, the weight of it pressing against her side like a stone. Emily intercepted her near the nurse's station, eyes wide. "Detectives, something's wrong. I can't find Mrs. Singh. She was in her bed an hour ago, but now she's gone." Sarah's stomach lurched. "Gone? Did anyone see her leave?" Emily shook her head. "No," but her voice caught. Her radio was buzzing. "I heard whispers through it, like the intercom, but closer." Sarah grabbed O'Connor from the east wing, and the three of them swept the halls. No sign of Mrs. Singh. Her bed empty, her slippers still by the nightstand. They returned to the tunnels. The deeper they went, the colder the air felt. Emily's flashlight beam caught something ahead, a shape on the ground. It was Mrs. Singh's radio, abandoned, still hissing faintly with static. Sarah crouched, lifting it slowly. Through the static, the voice seeped out, low and satisfied. She came willingly. She wanted to confess. Emily gasped, clapping a hand over her mouth. Sarah raised her light, sweeping the tunnel. The beam caught the edge of a doorway half hidden. A wooden door bolted into the concrete. Scratches marred the surface, as if someone had clawed at it from the inside. Sarah stepped closer, heart hammering. "What the hell is this?" O'Connor raised his gun. Only one way to find out. Sarah reached for the bolt, and from the other side of the door, a whisper came, not Margaret Hale's, not her own but Mrs. Singh's voice, trembling, desperate. "Help me." Chapter 8. The Dead Nurse Speaks. The bolt groaned as Sarah yanked it free. The wooden door creaked open, releasing a gush of stale, cold air that smelled of dust, smoke, and something faintly metallic. She raised her flashlight, and the beam cut through the darkness inside. The room beyond was small, hidden behind the concrete like a wound stitched shut and forgotten. Its walls were lined with shelves sagging under the weight of old medical supplies, rusted clamps, cracked glass bottles, yellowed gauze. A desk sat against the far wall, stacked with reel-to-reel tapes and a battered tape recorder. And in the corner, huddled on the floor, was Mrs. Singh. Her eyes were wide, her lips trembling, but she was alive. She lifted her hands weakly toward Sarah, whispering, "It was her, the nurse. She told me to come here." Emily rushed forward, wrapping her arms around the old woman, murmuring comfort. Sarah stepped inside carefully, her beam sweeping across the room. The air felt heavy, almost electric. She stopped at the desk. The reel-to-reel recorder was on, its spools still spinning slowly. The microphone cord snaked across the floor, disappearing into a hole in the wall wired, directly into the intercom system. "Son of a bitch," O'Connor muttered. "This is the control hub. They've been running the whole show from here." Sarah pressed play on one of the tapes. The room filled with a woman's voice, calm/soft, too familiar. "Patient, male, 68, morphine, 12 milligrams. He begged me to stop." I smiled. "Death is not cruelty, is mercy." Another tape. "Patient, female, 72, oxygen tube, removed for comfort." She passed quickly. A gift. The words chilled Sarah to her core. These weren't just whispers. They were confessions. Margaret Hale's voice, recorded long before her death. Emily shuddered. "It's her. Oh my God, it's really her." Sarah shook her head. No, someone found these tapes. Someone's been using them. Hale's long gone, but her ghost lives on in these machines. But even as she said it, a doubt coiled in her chest. The voice felt too present, too alive. The intercom above their heads crackled to life. This time, the voice wasn't from the tapes. It was live. "Welcome, detective. You found my sanctuary." Sarah's blood ran cold. She swung her flashlight to the far wall. And there, in the shadows of the tunnel entrance, stood a figure in a nurse's uniform. White dress, stiff cap, face half hidden in shadow. The figure didn't move, didn't speak, but the intercom carried the whisper as though it flowed from her lips. "You've listened to my work. You understand me now." Emily gasped, clutching Mrs. Singh tighter. O'Connor raised his gun, his hands steady but his breath sharp. "Hands where I can see them," he barked. The figure tilted its head, a grotesque mimicry of innocence. "Put down your gun, detective. I don't harm those who serve mercy." Sarah's mind raced. Costume or apparition, human or ghost. She stepped forward, her voice firm. "Margaret Hale has been dead for 30 years. Who are you really?" The figure chuckled, low and chilling. "Dead? No, detective. Never dead. I'm in every wall, every wire. I've always been here." The light flickered. The tapes whirred to life on their own, spilling overlapping confessions into the air until the room was a storm of voices. Dozens of them. Hundreds. Every patient Hale had ever touched. Emily covered her ears. Mrs. Singh wailed. Sarah steadied herself, fighting the rising panic. She lunged for the recorder, yanking its plug from the wall. Sparks spat, and the tapes died into silence. The figure at the tunnel's mouth vanished. For a long moment, only Sarah's ragged breathing filled the room. Later, as dawn broke over Maplewood, the investigators packed up the tapes, the recorder, and the evidence from the hidden room. Caldwell had been dragged into custody after finally admitting he knew about Hale's records and hid them to save the retirement home's reputation. Louise, still shaken, swore he'd seen the figure again just before sunrise walking the hall, smiling. "Grief hallucinations," one officer muttered, but Sarah wasn't so sure. She stood outside the east wing, watching the first light creep across the old brick. The intercom system had been ripped out, the wires severed, the speakers silent at last. And yet, as she turned to leave, her police radio crackled. Static hissed for a heartbeat. Then a whisper slid through, unmistakable. "Mercy isn't over. Detective, it never ends." Sarah froze. The radio fell silent again, leaving only the sound of her own pulse pounding in her ears.